Hi, Conrad White here with episode 22, and this week we are taking a look at the sordid list of executive orders issued by American presidents. What are they? How are they used? Are they constitutional? Well, let's start with what exactly an executive order is. According to the National Archives, executive orders are official documents numbered consecutively through which the President of the United States manages the operations of the federal government. No big deal. He needs some way to manage the executive branch, right? And according to the U.S. Supreme Court, the goal of an executive order is just to clarify or act to further a law put forth by the Congress or the Constitution. It is not intended to make up new laws, and executive orders should never violate the Constitution. The Constitution is crystal clear on this matter. Article 1, Section 1, Sentence 1. All legislative powers herein granted shall be vested in a Congress of the United States, which shall consist of a Senate and House of Representatives. The Constitution and the Supreme Court both agree. The President is not to make laws via executive order or any other mechanism. That is the job of Congress. Also, the Constitution goes on to say the specific power to declare war shall also be reserved for Congress. That was seen as an important separation of power. The Congress shall declare war, and the President shall run it. So let's take a look at how some presidents have issued executive orders and how they hold up. Franklin D. Roosevelt issued a total of 3,728 executive orders between 1933 to 1945. One of his most famous and a particularly terrible order was EO 9066, allowing for the relocation of Japanese Americans during World War II into prison camps. Who needs their civil rights and due process of law as outlined in the 5th and 14th Amendments to the Constitution? Not Japanese Americans during World War II, according to FDR. Sadly, EO 9066 was not challenged until a congressional committee created by Jimmy Carter investigated the EO and found the incarceration of Japanese Americans was not justified by military necessity, but rather was based on race prejudice, war hysteria, and a failure of political leadership. FDR also passed EO 6101, which outlawed the ownership of all gold coins by private citizens. This is a violation of basic property rights. And remember, history will repeat itself. So make sure you get your hands on our free gold and silver report at successcouncil.com/free report. It shows you how to prepare now to avoid falling victim to such laws. While FDR really got the executive order ball rolling in a big way, the next president to majorly play ball was JFK. President John F. Kennedy issued a particularly intrusive collection of executive orders which allowed a total subjugation of fundamental freedoms. For example, the first of the Kennedy-issued executive orders allows the president to take control of all media as long as a national emergency exists. And guess who gets to define when there is a national emergency? You guessed it, the president. Goodbye checks and balances. Goodbye due process. But it gets worse. Other executive orders from this cluster allow the seizure of all facilities that produce energy, including electricity, gasoline, and solid fuels. Under these circumstances, the president could also control all means of transportation, both public and private, including ground and air transportation. Another declares that our food resources could be taken over by the executive branch. This includes all agriculture, distribution, and retail facilities. Other executive orders allow for the involuntary registration and relocation of U.S. citizens into labor groups under government surveillance. You can ask the Japanese Americans if this sounds familiar. This group of orders touch nearly every tenet of private life and commerce, and none of them have been repealed. In fact, they have been expanded. Remember the FEMA disaster during Hurricane Katrina? Well, the federal government acted under the same law using executive orders to respond to that catastrophe. Scared yet? Let's also not forget something former Congressman Ron Paul often reminds us. The default position of the Constitution is inaction. If the duties are not clearly given to the federal government, then it is their job not to act. Moving on. President Gerald Ford expanded JFK's emergency executive orders by empowering government to take over health, education, welfare, mechanisms of production and distribution, energy sources, wages, salaries, credit, and the flow of money, using the very popular reasoning, well, the last guy did it and got away with it. In the 1980s, President Ronald Reagan sent military forces to El Salvador without Congress declaring an act of war. He claimed he had authority in furtherance of the War Powers Resolution of Congress enacted in 1973. The War Powers Resolution was intended to curtail Nixon sending more troops into Vietnam without a declaration of war. This resolution provides that the president can send U.S. armed forces into action abroad only by authorization of Congress or in case of a national emergency created by attack upon the United States, its territories or possessions, or its armed forces. And you guessed it, the president gets to determine what constitutes a national emergency. President Bill Clinton initiated 363 executive orders, including approving the Kosovo War in 1999 without congressional approval and by using the same war powers excuses as Reagan. So you can see by these above examples how American presidents have used executive orders to circumvent establishing a law or declaring a war the constitutional way by getting congressional approval. But what about presidential action that you don't really want embodied in an official document like in an executive order? Since having a pesky record of your unconstitutional behavior can go down badly in the history books, it's sometimes much better to just use secret executive orders. For example, President George W. Bush allowed wiretapping of domestic citizens to witch hunt for terrorists under a secret executive order. Unfortunately, the targets of eavesdropping are never revealed due to national security reasons. The feds use the excuse that this would give the terrorists a leg up. This also means that no one will ever know who has been constitutionally injured by this practice, and therefore, no one has standing to bring a lawsuit before any court in the nation to end this practice or to protect his or her rights. Bush also initiated a number of executive off-the-record orders approving enhanced interrogation techniques, or as we now know, torturing suspects in Guantanamo. He did this despite the fact that he issued EO 13440 specifically saying that the CIA may not degrade, torture, or treat inhumanely any detainee. One of the approved practices was waterboarding. Signing statements are variations on executive orders that amount to the same thing. More power in the presidency. Obama expertly explained the illegality and danger of them at a 2007 campaign event.
When Congress offers you a bill, do you promise not to use presidential signage to get your way?
Yes. Let me just explain for those who are unfamiliar with this issue. We've got a government designed by the founders so that there'd be checks and balances. You don't want a president who's too powerful, or a Congress who's too powerful, or a courts who's too powerful. Everybody's got their own role. Congress's job is to pass legislation. The president can veto it or he can sign it. But what George Bush has been trying to do as part of his effort to accumulate more power in the presidency is he's been saying, well, I can basically change what Congress passed by attaching a letter saying, I don't agree with this part or I don't agree with that part. I'm going to choose to interpret it this way or that way. That's not part of his power. But this is part of the whole theory of George Bush that he can make laws as he's going along. I disagree with that. I taught the Constitution for 10 years. I believe in the Constitution and I will obey the Constitution of the United States. We're not going to use signing statements as a way of doing an end run around Congress. All right?
With Obama in the office, we should be heading in the right direction now, right? Wrong. Within 9 months of taking office, Obama was using signing statements and executive orders in even more egregious ways than Bush could have dreamed of. Obama has gone even further with the expansion of the presidential kill list that, according to him, may target U.S. citizens without any due process whatsoever. Yes, that's right, folks. The President of the United States can kill your son or daughter just because he suspects them of terror against the U.S. or any other country. By the way, federal prosecutors have interpreted the term terrorism to include charitable contributions to Palestinians. I don't follow U.S. politics too closely, but I am unaware of a time when a president identified himself and a constitutional authority identified an act as a crime, then committed the same crime he accused someone else of. We truly are in bizarro world here, where criminals rule us. When it comes down to it, executive orders have been used throughout the 20th and 21st century to circumvent the checks and balances of Congress and as a power-grabbing mechanism. But it is important to note, executive orders are not the tool of one party. As we explained in episode 5, the two parties work together to advance the cause of totalitarianism. The goal is what we have today, a democratically elected dictator. This all represents an horrific trend of ever-increasing totalitarianism. America really needs to pay attention to what is going on and reverse course quickly while some of their freedoms remain. Be a patriot and like this video. Share it with your friends. Subscribe to our channel and check out our other videos at www.successcouncil.com. Next week, we will be discussing why it is important to have separation of powers. So stay tuned.